My name is Daniel Rowe. I've been a fire lookout for almost 7 years, long enough that people assume I've seen everything. Lightning strikes, dry thunderstorms, careless campers, the occasional black bear wandering too close to the access road. You sit alone on a tower for weeks at a time, and the isolation becomes normal. The quiet becomes a tool. You learn the landscape the way other people learn their own house at night, by memory and instinct instead of sight. This season, I was assigned to a remote tower tucked into a section of national forest that doesn't get many visitors. No trails within miles, no campgrounds, just timber, rock, and old service roads that haven't been graded in decades. The kind of place where your biggest concern is boredom. The Forest Service upgraded our camera systems this year. Motion-activated units mounted on the tower and along a few ridgelines, feeding into a local drive and a live monitor inside the cab. The idea was early detection, unauthorized campfires, smoke, trespassers. I didn't love the idea at first. Part of the job for me was being unseen, watching without being watched. But rules are rules. That morning started like any other. I logged weather conditions at sunrise, checked humidity, wind speed, barometric pressure. Everything was calm. Too calm, maybe. No wind through the trees. No bird chatter. Even the insects were quiet, like the forest hadn't fully woken up yet. By mid-morning, I was running system checks. The cameras showed nothing unusual. Deer on the east slope. A pair of coyotes cutting across an old logging cut around 9:40. Normal movement. Predictable movement. At 11:07 a.m., Camera 3 triggered. Camera 3 covers a narrow stretch of terrain about half a mile north of the tower. It's not a trail, exactly. More like a natural funnel between two rocky rises where animals tend to pass through. The alert popped up on the monitor, and I glanced over without much interest. First, I thought it was a hiker. The figure was upright, moving slowly through frame. Human-shaped. That alone was strange. There were no permits issued for that area, and the nearest access point would have required a full day of bushwhacking. Still, people do stupid things in national forests all the time. I leaned closer to the screen. The camera had captured a clear image. No motion blur. Good lighting. The figure wasn't wearing a pack. No visible gear. No bright colors. Just dark clothing that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. What caught my attention wasn't how it looked, though. It was how it moved. It didn't walk the way people walk through uneven terrain. There was no hesitation, no testing of footing. Each step was placed perfectly, as if the ground was flat and familiar. The stride was long but controlled, almost careful, like it didn't want to disturb anything. The camera snapped another frame. The figure's head turned slightly, angled toward the camera. That's when my stomach tightened. The cameras are well hidden. No reflective casing. No obvious lens glint. Even animals don't notice them most of the time. Whatever this was, it hadn't just wandered into frame. It had adjusted its path just enough to look directly at the unit. I told myself it was coincidence. Pareidolia. A trick of angles. Then the motion sensor triggered again. The figure stopped. It stood perfectly still for several seconds, centered in the frame. Not looking around. Not scanning. Just waiting. I checked the timestamp. 11:09 a.m. I zoomed in. The resolution wasn't great at that distance, but enough to make out details. The proportions were wrong. Arms a little too long. Shoulders too narrow. The head sat forward on the neck in an unnatural way, like it was craning down rather than looking ahead. No backpack. No visible footwear. I felt stupid for being unsettled. Fire lookouts see weird things. Light plays tricks. Shadows stretch. Fatigue messes with perception. Then the figure raised its head. It wasn't looking at the camera anymore. It was looking uphill. toward the tower. A chill ran through me, sharp and immediate. Camera 3 doesn't have a line of sight to the tower itself. There's too much elevation change. Too many trees. From that position, you shouldn't be able to see me. The figure tilted its head further back, slow and deliberate, as if tracking something above it. As if tracking me. I backed away from the monitor without realizing it, my chair scraping against the floor. My rational brain kicked in, listing explanations. Illegal camper, poacher, someone off their meds, someone who got lost and was acting strangely. All of those explanations failed one simple test. People don't move like that. At 11:12 a.m., the figure moved again. Instead of continuing through the natural corridor, it stepped off to the side, pushing through dense undergrowth that even animals usually avoid. Branches bent out of its way, not snapping, not resisting. The body flowed through the brush with a smoothness that made my skin crawl. The camera triggered one last time. The final frame showed the figure partially obscured by foliage, one arm visible, bent at an angle that didn't look comfortable. The hand was open, fingers splayed wide. Too wide. I shut off the monitor. I didn't know why. Some instinctive, childish reaction, like if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. I stood there, listening to the hum of the tower, the faint creak of metal expanding in the sun. The radio was silent. No calls from dispatch. No reports of missing hikers. No alerts. I turned the monitor back on. Camera 3 was quiet. No new triggers. I told myself I'd overreacted. That isolation had gotten to me. That by the end of the season, everyone starts seeing things that aren't there. Then, at 11:26 a.m., Camera 1 triggered. Camera 1 faces the access road. And whatever had been on Camera 3 was now a lot closer. Camera 1 shouldn't have triggered at all. That's what I told myself as I leaned back toward the monitor, heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Camera 1 is set up along the old service road that winds up the mountain, the only practical way to reach the tower. It's narrow, overgrown, and blocked by a locked gate more than 3 miles downhill. Even Forest Service trucks only come up there maybe once every few weeks. The alert timestamp read 11:26 a.m. I stared at the screen as the image loaded. First, there was nothing. Just the road, cracked and pale with dust, framed by pines that hadn't been trimmed in years. The air shimmered slightly from heat. No vehicles, no animals. Then something shifted at the very edge of the frame. I leaned in closer. A shape stepped forward, slow and deliberate, emerging from behind a stand of trees that shouldn't have offered any cover that close to the road. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't sneaking. It walked straight into view as if it had always planned to be seen. The figure was closer now than it had been on Camera 3, and the details were clearer. It was tall, taller than most people I knew, thin in a way that didn't look like malnutrition, more like something stretched beyond its intended proportions. The clothes, or what I thought were clothes earlier, didn't hang or fold naturally. They clung too closely, as if they were part of the body rather than something worn over it. No backpack, no tools, no visible weapons. I checked the zoom again, my fingers clumsy on the controls. The face came into focus. I wish it hadn't. The skin was pale, almost gray, but not in a sickly way. Smooth, too smooth. No visible scars, no wrinkles, no sun damage. The eyes were dark, not just in color but in depth, like light went in and didn't come back out. The mouth was closed, lips pressed together tightly, as if it were concentrating on holding something in. It wasn't looking around. It was looking straight up the road, straight at the tower. A sudden, irrational thought hit me. It knows exactly where I am. I stepped back again, my chair tipping slightly before I caught myself. My palms were slick with sweat. I reached for the radio, then hesitated. What was I supposed to say? Dispatch. There's a guy on the road acting weird? That happens all the time. Dispatch. There's something tall and wrong walking toward my tower? That gets you a psych eval. I forced myself to breathe slowly and kept watching. The figure stopped moving. It stood in the center of the road, feet planted wide apart, head tilted upward. From this distance, I couldn't tell if it was squinting against the sun or smiling. The idea that it might be smiling made my stomach turn. The motion sensor triggered again. The figure raised one arm. Not a wave, not a gesture for help. It lifted its hand and pressed the palm flat against the air, fingers spread, as if testing an invisible surface. The camera caught a sharp image of the hand. There were too many joints. That's the only way I can describe it. The fingers bent in places they shouldn't, each one slightly longer than the last, tapering to blunt ends instead of nails. The thumb sat too low on the palm, twisted inward at an odd angle. I felt cold all over, despite the heat inside the cab. The figure lowered its arm and took another step forward. Then another. I glanced out the window without thinking, my eyes scanning the treeline and the distant stretch of road visible from the tower. I couldn't see anything from that angle. The forest looked exactly as it always did. Still, indifferent, endless. When I looked back at the monitor, the figure was gone. No gradual exit. No movement off frame. Just gone. The road was empty again. The camera didn't trigger after that. I waited for several minutes, staring at the screen, half expecting it to reappear inches from the lens. Nothing happened. No alerts. No movement. I checked the system logs. Camera 1 hadn't malfunctioned. No glitches. No dropped frames. Whatever I'd seen, the camera had seen too. At 11:41 a.m., my radio crackled to life. Lookout 7, this is dispatch. Radio check. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Lookout 7. Go ahead, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just doing a routine check-in, dispatch said. Everything quiet up there? I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Yeah, I said. All quiet. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I didn't know how to explain what I'd seen without sounding unhinged. Dispatch acknowledged and signed off, the radio returning to its low hiss. I sat down heavily and rubbed my face with both hands. This was getting to me. That was the only explanation that made sense. Isolation, stress, a trick of the light combined with a camera angle that exaggerated features. The mind fills in gaps when it wants a story. I forced myself to eat a protein bar and drink some water. Grounding rituals. Normal behavior. At 12:03 p.m., Camera 4 triggered. Camera 4 faces the tower itself. Specifically, the area directly beneath it. I stared at the monitor as the image loaded, my pulse thudding in my ears. The ground beneath the tower was empty. No animals, no people, but something had changed. In the dirt directly below the stairs were footprints. Bare footprints. They were deep, pressed into soil that shouldn't have been soft enough to hold that kind of impression. The stride between them was too long, each step spaced far apart, leading in a slow circle around the base of the tower. The last set of prints stopped at the bottom of the stairs, and the camera captured one final detail. The footprints were facing inward, toward the ladder, toward me. I didn't move for a long time. I stood there, staring at the monitor, trying to convince myself that the footprints weren't real, that the camera angle was playing tricks, that maybe a bear had stood on its hind legs and left some distorted impression in the dirt. I knew better. I've tracked animals for years. I know what paws look like. I know how weight distributes, how claws leave marks, how soil collapses under pressure. These were human footprints. Almost. The toes were too long. spread wider than they should have been. The heel impressions were narrow, like whoever made them carried most of their weight forward. And there were no signs of approach, no disturbed brush, no broken twigs, no scuffed ground leading up to the first print. It was as if they had simply appeared beneath the tower. I stepped away from the monitor and forced myself to look out the windows, scanning every direction. The cab sits high enough that you get a clean view of the immediate surroundings, but not the entire slope. Trees block too much. Rock outcroppings create blind spots. Nothing moved. The forest was silent again. That silence felt heavier now, like pressure building in my ears. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the area beneath the tower, following the path of the footprints as best I could from above. They circled once, maybe twice, then ended at the base of the stairs. The metal steps leading up to the cab were clean. No prints on the first rung. No handprints on the railing. I told myself that meant something, that it hadn't climbed yet, that I still had time. I checked the locks without realizing I was doing it. Door secured. Emergency hatch sealed. Windows latched. Everything as it should be. At 12:17 p.m., camera 4 triggered again. I snapped my head back to the monitor. The view hadn't changed much. Same dirt, same shadows, same footprints, except now one of them was deeper, as if weight had been applied again. Fresh. I felt a tightness in my chest, a sharp, panicked urge to do something, anything, instead of standing there watching. I reached for the radio again. "Dispatch," I said, my voice lower than usual. "This is Lookout 7. There was a brief pause before the reply came back. "Go ahead. Lookout 7. I've got signs of unauthorized access near the tower," I said carefully. "Possible trespasser." "How close?" Dispatch asked. I glanced at the monitor. Directly beneath the tower. Another pause, longer this time. "Copy that," Dispatch said. "Can you visually confirm?" I swallowed. "Negative," I said. "Not currently visible." "Any vehicles on the access road?" "No." "Any sign of campfire or smoke?" "No." "All right," Dispatch said. "We'll log it. Closest ranger unit is about 2 hours out. Advise if the situation changes." 2 hours. I acknowledged and signed off, my hand shaking slightly as I set the radio down. At 12:24 p.m., the metal stairs creaked. It was faint, barely audible over the ambient noise of the tower. A low, stressed sound, like metal adjusting to temperature. I froze. The stairs creaked all the time. Wind, heat, shifting weight. I knew that, but there was no wind, and the sound came again, this time unmistakably rhythmic. One slow creak, a pause, another. Something was putting weight on the stairs. I forced myself to move, stepping carefully toward the window that overlooked the ladder. I didn't want to rush. Sudden movements felt dangerous, like prey behavior. I leaned forward just enough to see the top of the staircase. The first few steps were empty. Then I saw a hand. It wrapped around the railing from below, fingers curling upward into view. The skin was the same pale gray I'd seen on the camera, stretched tight over long bones. The fingers bent awkwardly as they tightened their grip, joints flexing in a way that made my teeth ache just watching it. Slowly, a second hand joined the first. The railing groaned softly. Whatever was climbing wasn't in a hurry. I backed away from the window, every instinct screaming at me to run even though there was nowhere to go. My eyes flicked to the emergency axe mounted near the door. The bear spray, the flare gun, none of it felt adequate. The stairs creaked again, closer now. I heard a sound then, faint but unmistakable. Breathing, not labored, not rushed, measured, intentional. I grabbed the radio and pressed the transmit button. "Dispatch," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts. "The trespasser is climbing the tower." Static crackled for a moment before dispatch responded. Sharper now. "Lookout 7, repeat last." "It's climbing the tower," I said. "It's on the stairs." "Is the individual armed?" "I don't know," I said. "I can't see." The stairs creaked again, loud enough that dispatch must have heard it through the open mic. There was a brief, stunned silence on the other end. "Lookout 7, dispatch said slowly. "We're dispatching law enforcement and SAR. Lock down the cab. Do not engage." I let go of the transmit button and stumbled back, my legs weak. The hands disappeared from view as the climbing continued. I realized then that it had never looked hurried on camera because it didn't need to be. It knew I was trapped. The top step creaked. Something brushed against the underside of the cab. A shadow passed beneath the door's narrow window. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold. A soft knock, not pounding, not violent, just a polite, deliberate tap against the door, as if it expected me to answer. I didn't answer the door. That sounds obvious now, but in that moment, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. I stood there, frozen a few feet away, staring at the thin rectangle of cloudy glass set into the metal door. The shadow on the other side shifted slightly, stretching and narrowing as whatever stood there adjusted its posture. Another knock followed. Same rhythm, same careful pressure. Tap, pause, tap. It wasn't trying to break in. It was announcing itself. My radio crackled on the desk behind me. Dispatch calling my name. Their voice tinny and distant through the speaker. I didn't turn around. I couldn't take my eyes off the door. "Lookout 7. Do you copy?" I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. Every step felt loud, clumsy. I grabbed the radio and pressed the button with shaking fingers. "I copy," I whispered. "Is the individual attempting entry?" Dispatch asked. I glanced at the door again. The handle was still, the lock untouched. "Negative," I said. "It's just standing there." Another knock, slightly firmer this time. Dispatch heard it. "What was that?" the voice asked, suddenly tight. "It's knocking," I said. Saying it out loud made it feel unreal, like I was narrating someone else's nightmare. "It's not forcing the door." "Maintain lockdown," dispatch said. "Do not respond. Units are en route." I released the transmit button. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of the tower and the faint hiss of the radio. My ears rang with the absence of sound. I held my breath, waiting. Then a voice came through the door. It was quiet, almost gentle. "Daniel." My name. Not shouted. Not distorted. Spoken the way someone says your name when they're standing right behind you in a grocery store aisle. My knees nearly gave out. I hadn't told dispatch my name during this shift. The tower logs had it, sure, but those records weren't accessible out here. No one should have known who I was without being told. I pressed my back against the far wall, putting as much distance between myself and the door as the small cab allowed. "Daniel," the voice said again. "I know you're there." It sounded practiced, each word carefully shaped, as if it had learned them recently and didn't want to get them wrong. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, forcing myself to stay present. Panic would get me killed faster than anything else. The voice continued. "You watch from above," it said. "You see everything." I thought of the cameras, the monitor. A slow, creeping realization settled in my chest. It wasn't just moving toward the tower. It had been watching me watching it. I took a step toward the desk, careful not to make noise, and glanced at the monitor. Camera 4 still showed the area beneath the tower. The footprints were unchanged. The stairs were empty. Whatever was at the door wasn't visible on any camera. The voice spoke again, closer somehow, even though the door hadn't moved. "You see animals," it said. "You see fire. You see people when they don't know they're seen." My throat burned. My mouth felt dry. "I see you," the voice said softly. I hit the transmit button without thinking. "Dispatch," I said, my voice shaking. "It's talking. It knows my name." The reply came immediately. "Lookout 7, stay calm. Do not respond to it. Help is on the way." As if summoned by those words, the door handle twitched. Just a little. The lock held. I watched, frozen, as the handle slowly rotated, testing resistance. Not forcing. Not yanking. Just learning. "It's locked," the voice observed, almost curious. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not from fear alone but from the overwhelming wrongness of the situation. Predators rush. They intimidate. They escalate. This thing was patient. The handle returned to its original position. The voice lowered, dropping to a near whisper. "You stay inside," it said. "That's smart." A pause. "People usually come out." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean, usually?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The second the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. The voice stilled. Then it smiled. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it in the way the next words came out, pleased and gentle and terrifyingly calm. "You can hear me," it said. "Good." The radio squawked with feedback as dispatch spoke over the open channel. "Lookout 7, do not engage," they said urgently. Too late. The voice leaned closer to the door. I heard something brush against the metal, a soft, dragging sound, like fingertips tracing the surface. "I'm not an animal," it said. "You know that now." The cameras all triggered at once. The monitor erupted into overlapping alerts, each feed lighting up in rapid succession. I turned just in time to see camera 1, 2, 3, and for all show the same thing. The figure, standing impossibly close to each lens, head tilted, eyes fixed forward, smiling. It wasn't moving between cameras. It was already there, everywhere. The lights in the cab flickered. The voice at the door spoke one last sentence before the power cut out completely, plunging the tower into sudden, suffocating darkness. "I learned by watching you." The darkness felt wrong. Not just the absence of light, but heavy, like it had weight. The hum of the tower died with the power, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and uneven. I stood there, hands outstretched slightly, afraid to move too suddenly and collide with something I couldn't see. The door was still there. I knew that. I could feel its presence the way you sense a wall inches from your face in the dark. I didn't hear the thing breathe anymore. That scared me more than the knocking. I forced myself to count. 1, 2, 3. Anything to keep my mind from spiraling. I reached for the flashlight clipped to my belt, my fingers fumbling before finally closing around it. The click of the switch sounded impossibly loud. The beam cut through the darkness, shaky and narrow. The door was exactly where it should be. No dents, no scratches, the handle untouched, no shadow on the other side of the window. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then the light flickered. Once, twice. I smacked the side of the flashlight with my palm, panic flaring, but it steadied again. The beam swept across the cab, desk, chair, bunk, emergency supplies. Everything familiar and suddenly alien under harsh white light. The radio was dead. No lights, no hiss. The monitors were black. The cameras were gone. I was alone up there now, truly alone. Another sound broke the silence. A slow scrape directly beneath my feet. Metal on metal. Something was moving on the underside of the cab. The flashlight beam jerked toward the floor, as if I could see through solid steel if I just tried hard enough. The scraping continued, slow and deliberate, circling beneath me. It wasn't trying to get in anymore. It was exploring. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall, every muscle locked tight. The sound stopped beneath me and resumed somewhere else, closer to the stairs. I pictured it clinging to the structure, those long fingers curling around bolts and seams, learning the shape of the tower the way it had learned my name. The voice came again, softer now, coming from below. "You don't like the dark," it said. The words drifted upward through the floor, distorted but unmistakable. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, forcing myself to stay grounded. Talking back was a mistake. I knew that, but doing nothing felt impossible. "I can't see you," I said before I could stop myself. A pause. Then a low, almost amused sound that might have been a laugh. "You don't need to," it replied. "You already know where I am." The scraping resumed, then stopped abruptly. Footsteps followed. Slow, measured. On the stairs. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I aimed it toward the door again. The steps creaked under weight that sounded too evenly distributed, too controlled. No rush, no stumble, just confidence. The footsteps stopped right outside. Something pressed against the door. Not the handle. The surface itself bowed inward slightly, metal groaning under pressure that felt exploratory rather than aggressive. I took another step back, my calves hitting the bunk. There was nowhere else to retreat. The pressure eased. "You lock yourself in," the voice said thoughtfully. "You think that makes you separate." The flashlight flickered again, dimming for a heartbeat before returning. "You watch from above," it continued. "You decide what matters. Fire or no fire, animal or person, safe or dangerous." The door creaked softly as something leaned against it. "I want to see how you decide," the voice said. A sudden bang made me cry out despite myself. Not the door, the window. The flashlight beam snapped to the glass just in time to see a pale shape slide out of view. A handprint appeared on the outside, pressed flat against the window, fingers splayed wide. The glass held. For now. The hand withdrew, then reappeared, higher this time, dragging slowly downward and leaving a faint smear behind. I could see the joints clearly now. Too many bends. Too much movement. "You can see me now," the voice said, close to the window. "That helps." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "Please," I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. The hand stilled. "People say that," it replied. "They say many things." The flashlight flickered again, weaker this time. I slapped it hard, panic surging as the beam dimmed and sputtered. "No," I muttered. "No, no, no." The light died completely. Darkness swallowed everything. I stood there blind, my senses screaming. I could hear it breathing again now, slow and steady, so close I could almost feel the warmth of it through the metal and glass. The door handle turned. This time it didn't stop. The lock rattled violently as something applied pressure with careful precision. Not brute force but understanding. The metal shrieked, protesting in a way that told me it wouldn't hold forever. The radio crackled faintly, a ghost of sound breaking through the dead air. "Lookout 7. Dispatch's voice whispered through static. "Respond." Hope flared painfully in my chest. "I'm here," I shouted. "I'm here." The pressure on the door stopped. The breathing ceased. The voice came back colder now. "They can't see you," it said. "But I can." The lock snapped, not shattered, just undone. The door opened a few inches, letting a thin blade of outside light slice into the darkness. I saw part of its face then. One eye, too close, too focused. The door paused, as if waiting, as if giving me a choice. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe shock. Maybe some buried instinct telling me that noise would only encourage it. I stood there, frozen, staring at the thin wedge of light cutting across the floor as the door hovered open just enough to remind me how fragile that barrier had always been. The eye stared back at me. It didn't blink. Up close, it was worse than the cameras had shown. The scara wasn't white, but a dull, cloudy gray, like old ice. The pupil was wide and unmoving, swallowing what little light reached it. There was no panic in it, no hunger, just focus, assessment. The door creaked softly as it pushed a fraction of an inch wider. I moved, not toward it, down. I dropped to the floor, rolling sideways and grabbing the emergency axe from its mount in one desperate motion. The sound of metal leaving its bracket echoed in the small cab, loud and final. The eye followed me. The door stopped moving. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the voice spoke again, closer than it had ever been, no longer filtered through metal. "That's new," it said. The axe felt ridiculous in my hands. Too small, too human. But it was the only thing I had left that wasn't passive. Watching had brought this thing here. Acting was all I had now. "I don't want to hurt you," the voice said, and for the first time, I believed it thought that was true. The door shifted. I lunged. I swung the axe at the doorframe with everything I had, burying the blade into the metal just above the latch. Sparks flew. The impact jarred my arms up to the shoulders, pain exploding through my wrists, but the door jammed, stuck against the axe head. The thing reacted instantly. The eye disappeared as the door slammed shut from the other side, metal shrieking in protest. Something hit it hard enough to bow it inward again, not exploratory now. Angry, the cab shook. I staggered back, clutching the axe handle, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. The door rattled as pressure returned, heavier this time, testing the new resistance. The voice lost some of its calm. "You don't understand," it said. I wasn't finished. I yanked the axe free and backed away, keeping it raised. The door flexed again, then again, each impact measured, increasing by degrees like a scientist increasing voltage. The hinges screamed. I glanced around wildly, my mind racing. There was only one way out that didn't involve that door. The emergency hatch. Set into the floor near the bunk, it led down into the ladder shaft, a last resort escape meant for fires, not whatever this was. It would put me on the stairs, exposed, but staying meant being cornered. The door buckled inward another inch. I ran. I dropped the axe long enough to tear open the hatch, metal clanging as it fell aside. Cool air rushed up from below, carrying the scent of dirt and pine and something else. Something wrong. The voice changed when it realized what I was doing. "Don't," it said, sharper now. I didn't listen. I swung my legs down into the hatch, gripping the ladder rungs with shaking hands. The metal was cold and slick under my palms. I started descending fast, too fast, skin scraping, breath coming in ragged gasps. Above me, the door finally gave. Metal tore. The sound was horrific, a shriek of failure that echoed down the shaft. Something heavy crashed into the cab, followed by a low, "Please" sound from above. It was inside now. I forced myself to keep moving. The ladder vibrated as weight shifted above, not rushing, not scrambling, matching my pace exactly. "You go down," the voice said from above, no longer bothering to hide its satisfaction. "Good. I wondered when you would." My boot slipped. I barely caught myself, pain shooting through my shoulder as I slammed against the ladder. I kept climbing down. The darkness below thickened, swallowing the weak daylight filtering down from above. My arms burned. My lungs screamed. I didn't dare look down for fear of what I might see waiting. The ladder ended sooner than I expected. My foot hit dirt. I stumbled off the last rung and nearly fell, catching myself on a support beam. The underside of the tower was a maze of metal struts and shadows, the ground uneven and littered with old debris. I turned just in time to see it emerge from the hatch above. It didn't climb down like a person. It flowed. Limbs unfolded in a sequence that made no sense. Hands gripping multiple rungs at once, body stretching and compressing with fluid ease. It landed lightly on the ground, straightening to its full height beneath the tower. Up close, it towered over me. The proportions were unmistakably wrong now. Too many joints, too much reach. The face was almost human if you didn't look too long, the features arranged just close enough to familiarity to hurt. Tilted its head. "You chose movement," it said. "Interesting." I raised the axe again, my hands barely steady. "Stay back," I said, my voice hoarse. It looked at the axe, then back at me. "That won't decide anything," it said gently. Took one step forward. The forest around us remained unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, no sound but my breathing and the faint creak of the tower above. I realized then what it wanted. Not to kill me, not yet. It wanted to see what I would do when I wasn't watching anymore. When I was the one being watched. It smiled wider than before. "Show me," it said. I ran. There was no heroic stand, no clever maneuver. The moment it stepped forward, every survival instinct I had screamed the same word, loud and absolute. I turned and bolted into the trees, boots slipping on loose dirt and pine needles as I crashed through the undergrowth. I didn't look back. Branches whipped at my face and arms. Rocks lurked under leaves, threatening to break an ankle. The forest swallowed me almost immediately, the tower vanishing behind layers of trunks and shadow. Behind me, I heard it move. Not fast, not slow, matching me. That was the worst part. If it had chased me, if I'd heard pounding footsteps or frantic breathing, I could have understood it. Predators chase. That's familiar. That's something you can plan for. This thing didn't chase. It followed. The sound it made was subtle, a soft shifting of weight, the occasional brush of something tall moving through branches without resistance. It didn't crash through the forest the way I did. The woods opened for it. I ran until my lungs burned and my vision narrowed, then forced myself to stop. I ducked behind a fallen log and crouched low, clutching the axe to my chest as I tried to quiet my breathing. Silence closed in again. I listened hard, straining to pick up any sound that wasn't my own heartbeat. Nothing. For a moment, just a moment, I dared to hope I'd lost it. Then a voice spoke from somewhere to my left. "You go quiet when you're afraid," it said. I flinched, biting down on a gasp. The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried easily through the trees, as if the forest itself was helping it along. I stayed still, didn't respond, didn't move. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. Time felt wrong out there, stretched thin and unreliable. A shape shifted between the trees ahead of me. I saw it then, partially obscured by branches, standing upright, head tilted slightly, listening. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking where I had been running, tracking the disturbance I'd left behind without needing scent or sound. "You don't disappear," it said calmly. "You leave lines." It took a step forward, then another, following the path of broken twigs and crushed ferns I'd carved through the forest like a map. I realized something then that made my stomach drop. It wasn't hunting me. It was studying me. I broke cover and ran again, veering sharply downhill this time, away from the tower and toward thicker terrain. My legs screamed in protest. Sweat stung my eyes. The axe felt heavier with every step. The ground sloped steeply, forcing me to slow whether I wanted to or not. I half slid, half fell down the incline, catching myself on trees and roots, my palms scraping raw. I heard it adjust behind me, not slipping once. At the bottom of the slope, I burst into a narrow ravine choked with brush. A trickle of water ran through the center, barely more than a wet line in the dirt. I splashed through it without thinking, hoping irrationally that it might confuse whatever sense it used to track me. I kept going until my legs gave out. I collapsed against a tree, gasping, every muscle trembling. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the axe. "Stop!" the voice said gently, now somewhere behind me again. I turned slowly, forcing myself to face it. It stood at the edge of the ravine, framed by branches and shadow. Up close, in natural light, it was harder to ignore how wrong it was. The limbs bent subtly as it shifted its weight, joints moving in sequences that didn't match human anatomy. Its chest didn't rise and fall the way mine did. It watched me with open curiosity. "You make choices quickly," it said. "That's good." I backed away until my spine hit the tree. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice raw, considered the question, head tilting. "I watch," it said. "That's what you taught me." Anger flared through the fear, sudden and sharp. "I didn't teach you anything," I snapped. It took a slow step closer, careful not to startle me, like someone approaching a wild animal. "You watched fires before they were fires," it said. "You watched people before they were lost. You decided when something mattered enough to act." It gestured vaguely toward the slope behind us, toward the unseen tower. "I learned that watching is power." My grip tightened on the axe. "So you're just what? Copying me?" I said. Its mouth curved, not quite a smile. "I'm improving the method." It stepped closer again. I swung the axe, not to hit it, at the ground between us, a desperate warning meant to buy space. The blade bit into dirt with a dull thud. It stopped immediately. The reaction was instant and telling. "Interest. Violence," it observed. "Another option." I yanked the axe free and backed away again, my foot slipping on wet ground. "Stay back," I said, louder now. "I mean it." It looked down at the axe, then at me. "You don't want me to stop," it said softly. "What?" I said. "If I stop," it continued, "you don't decide anymore. You just wait." The words hit harder than any threat. It wasn't wrong. Waiting had been my job. Watching, logging, reporting, acting only when the rules allowed it. Out here, alone, there were no rules. The forest felt closer now, pressing in on us. The light had shifted without me noticing, shadows stretching longer between the trees. "You're afraid," it said, "but you're also curious." I hated that it was right. It took one last step forward, close enough that I could smell it now, earthy, dry, like dust and old leaves. "I won't touch you," it said. "Not yet." Then it stepped aside, clearing the path past it. "Go," it said. "Show me what you choose next." And that's when I understood the truth. It was letting me run again, because the decision mattered more than the outcome. I didn't thank it. I don't know why that thought even crossed my mind, but it did, and I hated myself for it. The fact that part of me even considered responding politely told me how deep this thing had already gotten inside my head. I moved, not running this time, walking, slowly, deliberately. I stepped past it, keeping the axe raised, my eyes locked on its face. It didn't move, didn't reach for me, just watched with that same unreadable focus as I passed within arm's reach. Up close, I could see details I wished I couldn't. The skin wasn't just pale, it was uneven, almost layered, like something that had been reassembled more than grown. The eyes tracked every micro-movement I made. Not blinking, not distracted, learning. When I was several steps past it, I broke into a jog, then a run, putting as much distance between us as my legs would allow. It didn't follow, at least not immediately. I ran downhill, then cut hard to the east, following a game trail I recognized. It led toward a ridge that dropped sharply into a narrow valley. If I could reach the rock shelf near the overlook, I might be able to put a physical barrier between us. Something steep enough that even it would have to slow down. I moved fast but carefully now, choosing footing, minimizing noise. The forest around me still felt wrong. Too quiet. Like everything else had stepped back to make room for whatever was happening. After several minutes, I slowed and listened. Nothing. No voice. No movement. I reached the edge of the ridge and dropped to a knee, breathing hard. Below me, the valley stretched out in tangled green and shadow. The rock shelf jutted out a few yards ahead, sheer drop beyond it. I risked a glance behind me. Empty forest. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. That's when I noticed the change. The light had shifted again. The sun was lower now, shadows long and angular, even though it couldn't have been more than mid-afternoon. The forest didn't match the time in my head anymore. I checked my watch. It was still working. The time read 12:58 p.m. That didn't make sense. I'd been running, hiding, climbing, descending, at least an hour's worth of movement. Maybe more. My pulse spiked again. "You noticed," the voice said. I spun around, axe up, heart slamming. It stood a few yards away, at the edge of the trees, exactly where I'd last seen it. Not out of breath, not disturbed, just there. "How?" I demanded. "I didn't hear you." "You don't hear most things that matter," it replied calmly. I backed toward the rock shelf, the drop yawning behind me. Cold air rose from the valley below, carrying the smell of stone and damp earth. "You let me go," I said. "You said to go." "I did," it agreed. "You went," tilted its head, watching me the way someone watches a demonstration. "You chose distance," it continued. "That's consistent. But distance doesn't change observation. It only changes angles." My foot scraped rock behind me. I was running out of ground. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my effort to control it. I considered that again, eyes flicking briefly to the axe, then back to my face. "I want to see what you do," it said. "When the systems fail. When there's no report to file. No one to hand responsibility to." It gestured toward the forest. "This is where decisions are real." I laughed then, short and sharp and ugly. "You think this is some kind of test?" I said. Its mouth moved. Not quite a smile, not quite anything human. "Everything is a test," it replied. "You just don't usually know when you're taking one." Took a step closer. I raised the axe higher. "If you come any closer, I'll jump," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. It stopped instantly. The pause stretched. Wind stirred for the first time all day, whispering through the treetops. Somewhere far below, something moved, an animal, maybe. Normal life intruding on this impossible moment. The thing looked past me, down into the valley. "You could survive that fall," it said. "Injured, slower, afraid." I swallowed. "You could also die," it continued. "And then you wouldn't decide anything ever again." It looked back at me. "Which do you choose?" Rage flared, white hot. "You don't get to ask me that," I said. I already did. The world felt narrow then. reduced to the rock at my heels, the axe in my hands, and the thing watching me with infinite patience. I realized something else in that moment. It wasn't omniscient. It didn't know what I would do. That uncertainty mattered. I shifted my grip on the axe and did the last thing it expected. I threw it, not at its head, at its legs. The blade spun end over end and struck its shin with a wet, solid sound. Staggered. Just a little. Enough. I turned and jumped sideways, not off the cliff, but down along the narrow ledge beneath the shelf, grabbing at roots and stone as I slid out of sight. I hit hard, pain exploding through my shoulder, but I kept moving, crawling along the ledge until it narrowed and forced me into a shallow crevice. Above me, I heard something new. Not a voice, not footsteps, a sharp, abrupt sound. Surprise. "You changed the question," it said from somewhere above. I pressed myself deeper into the rock, heart hammering. "No," I whispered. I answered it. For the first time since this started, it didn't respond right away. And that silence felt like the most dangerous thing yet. I stayed in that crevice for a long time. Long enough that my muscles cramped and my fingers went numb from gripping stone. Long enough that the pain in my shoulder dulled into something distant and manageable. Long enough that the initial panic burned itself out, leaving behind a hollow, alert calm. I didn't move. Above me, the forest made sounds again. Wind, leaves, something small scurrying through brush. Normal noises returning one by one, like the world was cautiously resuming its routine. I counted my breaths. I listened. I waited. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. My watch still read just after 1 in the afternoon, mocking me with its stubborn normalcy. Time out here didn't behave the way it was supposed to. Finally, I heard it. Footsteps on rock above the ledge. Careful. Measured. The sound stopped directly over me. I held my breath. "I could pull you out," the voice said calmly from above. "Your position is unstable." I didn't respond. "You're hurt," it continued. "Your shoulder. Your hands. You're bleeding." It was right. I could feel the warm stickiness on my palms, the ache deep in my joints. I hadn't noticed when I'd started bleeding. Shock has a way of hiding things until it decides you're ready. "Staying still won't save you," it said. "It only delays the next decision." I tightened my grip and said nothing. The rock above me creaked softly as weight shifted. "You surprised me," it said, and there was something new in its voice. Not anger, not approval. Interest, sharpened. "You acted without watching first." I swallowed, my throat dry. "That changes things." A pause. Then, slowly, the weight lifted from above. Footsteps moved away along the ridge, retreating back into the forest. I waited another long stretch before daring to breathe normally again. When I finally pulled myself free of the crevice, the light had changed again. The sun was lower now, filtering through the trees at a shallow angle that painted everything in gold and shadow. It looked like late afternoon. My watch still insisted it wasn't. I moved carefully, every step deliberate. The axe was gone. My radio was gone. My tower, my vantage point, was miles uphill now, and I had no intention of going back. I followed the valley downhill, sticking close to water, keeping to cover. I didn't hear it follow me. I didn't hear anything that felt wrong. That terrified me. By the time I reached the old access road, my legs were shaking so badly I had to sit down. I leaned against a boulder and closed my eyes, just for a moment. That's when I heard an engine. I opened my eyes and saw a Forest Service truck rounding the bend, dust rising behind it like a miracle. I stood and waved both arms, ignoring the pain, my throat tight with something dangerously close to relief. The truck screeched to a stop. 2 rangers jumped out, hands already near their belts, eyes scanning the tree line. "Daniel?" one of them called. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. They got me into the truck, wrapped my shoulder, gave me water. They asked questions, rapid and urgent, but I couldn't bring myself to answer right away. I kept looking past them, into the forest, waiting to see a tall, pale shape step out between the trees. Nothing did. By the time we drove back up the mountain, the tower was intact. No broken door, no damage to the stairs, no footprints beneath it. The cameras were offline, the power system fried in a way no one could quite explain, but there was no recorded evidence of anything unusual before the failure. No unauthorized access, no trespasser, no predator. I filed my report anyway. They called it stress, dehydration, isolation-induced hallucination layered over a system malfunction. They put me on leave and reassigned the tower to someone else. I didn't argue. I left the forest 2 days later and didn't look back. For a while, life returned to something resembling normal. Physical therapy, counseling, paperwork, sleep that came in shallow bursts. Then the notifications started. My phone would light up late at night with motion alerts from cameras I didn't own. Trail cams, security feeds, doorbell footage, always places I wasn't. The images were always the same. A tall figure, just at the edge of frame. Never fully visible. Never moving toward the camera. Always looking directly into it. The messages never included sound. Just a single line of text attached to each alert. Still watching. I don't work as a lookout anymore. I don't install cameras. I don't keep smart devices in my home. I learned my lesson about watching. But sometimes when I wake up just before dawn, I feel that same pressure in the air. That same sense of being observed from somewhere just out of sight. And I understand the final truth I didn't want to admit back on that mountain. It didn't follow me out of the forest. It didn't need to. It learned what it wanted from me. How humans decide. How we hesitate. How we act when the rules disappear. And now it's watching everyone else. Waiting for the moment they don't realize they're being seen. Waiting to see what they choose.